The Time and Space of Uncle Albert by Russell Stannard. First published 1989 by Faber and Faber Limited. Chapter 5. How to Win a Dead Heat. Gedanken picked up the telephone. Hello? Hello, is that Gedanken? A voice said at the other end. Yes, Uncle, how are you? How's the shoulder? Oh, it's a bit stiff, but it's all right. Do you want to speak to Mum? No, it's you that I want. I take it that you're back from school. That's right. Have you got much homework on tonight? Well, no, not really. Well, it doesn't have to be in tomorrow. Why? Well, do you think that you could come round straight after tea? Gedanken laughed. Oh dear, poor Uncle. Your shoulder must really be hurting. Do you want me to come and give it another rub? I told Mum what you did yesterday, and she said you ought to have some stuff rubbed into it. I'll bring it round with me. No, stop fussing, said Uncle Albert. No, it's something much more important than this. It was what you said yesterday about the light beam always going away from you at the same speed. As soon as you finish tea, come on round. I think you might be onto something here. But don't bolt your tea down. I'm already getting into enough trouble with your mum and dad as it is. Half an hour later, Gedanken arrived. Sorry, I'm a bit late, she said breathlessly. It was my turn to do the washing up. They took so long to finish eating. Thought they'd never be done. I came as fast as I could, almost at the speed of light. Good, said Uncle Albert. Come into the study, and I'll beam you up. What do you want me to do? Well, best if the computer tells you when you get there. Welcome aboard, Captain, boomed the computer. I've been expecting you. Oh, it's nice to be back, Gedanken replied. Uncle Albert says you're going to show me what he wants me to do. That's right. Hey, what's all this? She asked, going over to some brand new equipment that hadn't been there before. Flash lamps, said the computer. Just a couple of flash lamps. One points to the front of the cabin, the other points to the back. She bent down to take a closer look. Careful, shouted the computer. Don't touch it. Gedanken drew back, startled. Sorry, said the computer, adding apologetically. I didn't mean to shout. It's just that those lamps are set up and mustn't be disturbed. Uncle Albert was very particular about that. He said they have to be dead centre, exactly halfway between the front and the back. Well, why? What's so special about them being in the middle? Asked Gedanken. No idea, said the computer. But then that's nothing new, he added. I'd have thought you'd have known. So would I, but he never tells me what he's up to. What, never? No. Oh, Gedanken said, looking surprised. After a while, she said, Don't you find that, well, a bit boring? You know, just working things out for him, but not really knowing why you're doing it. Of course, but that's what he's like. They're all like it, scientists. They treat us like, well, machines. Wouldn't occur to them to think that we're computers could take an interest in our work, given the chance. All they ever do is fill us full of instructions. Do this, do that, do the other. One instruction after another, not a word of explanation, and all the time I'm thinking to myself, why? What's the purpose of it all? Why can't they just tell us what it's all about, so we can take pride in our work? And then, what about when the answer comes out wrong, huh? They swear at us, they blame us. It's never actually our fault. Well, hardly ever. It's always them. They're forever making mistakes in their programs. Gedanken was beginning to feel quite sorry for the computer. She hadn't realized before that it might have feelings. As it continued grumbling to itself, she felt upset for thinking earlier that it had been pompous. She now saw that when it was showing her around the spacecraft that very first time, and when it took her on a tour of the moon and the planets, it was simply trying to take pride in its own work. As the grumbling went on, and on, she began to wonder whether it would stop. So she decided to change the subject. She gave a little cough. I don't want to interrupt, but I have been meaning to ask, what's your name? I can't go on talking to you without— Haven't got one, the computer interrupted sharply. Oh, Gedanken was rather taken aback by the abruptness of its reply. But I thought all computers had names, she continued. Names made up out of the first letters of words that tell you what it does and what it's for. Well, I don't. Gedanken felt very awkward. She had obviously brought up a touchy subject. Mind you, said the computer, I suppose he did try. Who? Uncle Albert. He tried to think up a name for me, something clever, but he couldn't. He's not very good at that sort of thing. He got cross and simply gave up. Gedanken was once again feeling rather sorry for the computer. She thought for a moment, and then decided she would try and cheer him up a bit. Well, if you like. Well, what I mean is, I could have a go at trying to think up a nice name for you. You would, replied the computer, obviously quite touched now. Yes. Oh, that's very kind of you. Very, very kind indeed. It doesn't have to be anything special, just a name. Yes, well, I'll see what I can do. Are you a boy or a girl? I don't know, said the computer, adding mischievously, how do you suggest I find out? Gedanken was about to smile at this, but decided the computer was getting to get rather naughty, so she simply said, I shall just assume you are a boy. Your voice sounds like a boy's. And with that, she looked about her expectantly. Anyway, she continued, what are we supposed to be doing? Ah, yes, replied the computer, we ought to be getting on with our work. By the side of the lamps there is a box with a switch. Do you see it? Yes. Put it to the on position, will you? So she did, and each lamp gave out a short flash of light. The two faint beams went racing to the ends of the cabin, one to the front, the other to the back. Race you, they called out in their high, giggly voices. Then, as they banged into the end walls of the cabin, they let out a pained "Ow!" and disappeared. Straight away, another pair of light beams was sent out by the lamps. The beams started out at the same time, and they arrived at the same time, each at its own end of the cabin. Well, what now? asked Gedanken. Well, that's it, said the computer. What do you mean, that's it? Just what I said. Uncle Albert just wants you to check when the light beams get to the ends of the cabin. It's a kind of race. He wants you to judge which beam arrives first. Gedanken looked puzzled. But it's obvious. It's a dead heat. They get there at the same time. They have to. They're both going at the same speed, the speed of light, and the lamps are in the centre of the cabin, so they both go the same distance. They must arrive at the same time. It doesn't need anyone to check that. That does seem pretty logical, agreed the computer, but I suppose your uncle knows what he's doing. Anyway, let's get on with it. He said he wanted you to judge the race while we're standing still, like this, and then again when we're up to speed. So, if you're happy that it's a dead heat, we can be on our way, right? Gedanken shrugged her shoulders and went over to her seat, strapped herself in, and pressed the red button to fire the rocket. Once up to speed, she released the button, and the spacecraft cruised silently. She swivelled her seat round to look at the light beams. She had left the lamps on, and they were still giving out their pairs of light beams. Nothing seemed to have changed. Race you, oh! Race you, oh! This is silly, said Gedanken. It's still a dead heat. I knew it would be. I told Uncle when we got up to high speed that first time. Do you remember the light beam out there? She said, pointing out of the front window. It kept going away from us at the same speed as before. It's the same here. Look at them. She pointed to the two light beams coming from the flash lamps. They're going at the same speed too. They're going the same distance. So it has to be a dead heat. And it is. This is getting boring. Gedanken turned away from the light beams. Instead, she began thinking up possible names for the computer. It wasn't as easy as she thought it was going to be, but eventually she suddenly brightened up. Got it, she exclaimed. I've thought of one. Hold on a minute. She mentally checked off the initials of the words against the name, ticking them on 7 fingers. Yes, that's it. Richard, she announced. Richard? Yes. What's that short for? Really intelligent computer, helpful and rather daring. Oh, I say, how grand. But rather daring, the computer added in a puzzled tone. Of course. Flying about in space at high speed all the time. You have to be very daring and very brave to be an astronaut, like us. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Gedanken. That's very kind of you. I've never had a name before. I shall store it away in a very special location in my memory. Of course, Gedanken interrupted. I shall just call you Dick. Dick, exclaimed the computer in astonishment. Why, Dick, what's that short for? Well, it's short for Richard, silly. As Gedanken said this, she became aware that something was wrong. Actually, very wrong. The spacecraft seemed to be going in a gentle dive. Then it suddenly lurched upwards, only to dive down again. It was like being on the Big Dipper at a fair. Dick, she said uncertainly, what's happening? I don't feel quite well, actually. She was quite frightened. Another violent lurch upwards, followed by another steep dive. Richard! Emergency! Emergency! Richard called out. The light beams began to fail, and it went pitch black. Emergency! Emergency! Power failure! Dick's voice was very slow and very low, like a record being played at the wrong speed. There came a long, low, whistling sound. This was followed by the sound of... Actually, Gedanken couldn't quite make it out. What was that sound? It was like a growl. It scared her to death. The growling noise got louder and louder. It was all around her. Then suddenly it struck her. It wasn't a growl. It was the sound of a pig. A pig? It was a pig snorting. She was sure it was. But what was a pig doing in the spacecraft? And where was it? Was it in fact in the spacecraft? Perhaps she was being attacked by a giant flying pig. Help! Help! Uncle Albert! She screamed. And something grabbed her by the shoulders. The next thing she knew, she was back in the study. She was still shouting for help. Uncle Albert was standing over her. He had his arms around her, comforting her gently. Hey, 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 he said, it's all right. Whatever is the matter, you're okay now. I am here, and you're back. Gedanken, it is Uncle. You're okay. Gedanken burst into tears. Oh, Uncle, it was horrible. It was terrible. It was like being attacked by a giant flying pig, and the spacecraft was all going out of control, and... Now, take it easy. Take it easy. What's all this about flying pigs? You saw a pig flying. Gradually she stopped crying and pulled herself together. Well, no, not exactly. I didn't see it. It was dark. But I heard it. It was so loud and frightening, and the sound came from everywhere, and... She stopped in mid-sentence and looked at him hard, accusingly. She had just realised something. You did this, she said. You made all that happen. You deliberately frightened me. Well, I don't think it's funny, but I knew there was something fishy going on, sending me up there simply to watch light beams. I knew there wasn't any point in that. I don't know what you're... Oh, yes, you do, shouted Gedanken angrily. You know perfectly well what was going on, and you made it happen. Dick told me the first time I went up there... Dick? Exclaimed Uncle Albert. Who in heaven's name is Dick? The computer! He told me that everything there happened because of your imagination. You deliberately imagined all of that. It wasn't funny. It wasn't. Gedanken, will you stop it? Said Uncle Albert. I promise you that I haven't got a clue what you are talking about. That was a perfectly sensible scientific experiment. That's all that I imagined. An experiment with some light beams. I haven't for one moment tried to imagine pigs or anything of that sort. I really haven't. You must believe me, Gedanken. She sat there, still glaring at him angrily, but then eventually she calmed down a little. Well, she said uncertainly, if you promise. I do. I really do, Gedanken. I did not make that deliberately happen to you. All right then, she said, adding hastily, but that's it. I'm never going back there again. I'm finished with your thought bubble. It was like a nightmare this time, only more real than a nightmare. Okay, Gedanken, agreed Uncle Albert. That was the last time. Obviously something went wrong. This beaming up business must be more dangerous than we thought. I told you I hadn't tried it out on real people before. He got up and went towards the kitchen. I'll make you a cup of tea. I'll make us both one. You scared the life out of me, too. A few minutes later, he came back with the drinks and some biscuits. Her favourite, chocolate ones. When she saw the biscuits, Gedanken knew what he was up to. He was trying to get round her. But then again, it's not every day you get chocolate biscuits. So soon she was her old self again. Right, said Uncle Albert as he cleared away the crockery. "Do you feel up to seeing the video, or have you had enough for one day?" Gedanken nodded. "Okay, let's see it." He eagerly switched on the set. He had obviously been impatient to see the result of the latest experiment. He sat down, and they both watched. The picture came up, showing the interior of the spacecraft, with the beams of light racing to the ends of the cabin. "Race you, ow! Race you, ow!" Gedanken leant back unimpressed. "It's a dead heat. What more do you expect?" "Wait," said Uncle Albert. "This is just the beginning, when you were standing still. I'm more interested in what happened when you got up to speed." "It was still a dead heat." "It was?" said Uncle Albert thoughtfully. Well, that certainly checks with what you told me before, about the speed of the beam of starlight being the same, whatever your speed was. This time, though, there were two beams, going in opposite directions. And it still didn't make any difference. It is a dead heat, yeah?" "Yes, definitely." "All right, then. Now, let's see that race from my point of view." As they continued to watch, they saw the rocket launch. As the spacecraft gathered speed, its length began to shrink. The various processes slowed down, the rate of the cabin clock and the winking of the lights on the control panel. All of this was familiar to them by now. Gedanken wasn't paying much attention. She was thinking that it wouldn't be long before they reached the frightening bit. Then Uncle Albert would know that she hadn't been making it up. But before they got to that part, it gradually dawned on her that something was a bit odd. "Race you, ooh. Race you, ooh. Ooh. Race you, ooh. Ooh. Race you, ooh. Ooh." The pained cries of "ooh" weren't right. In the spacecraft, the cries had occurred together when the two beams banged into the walls at the same time. Now one of them was happening before the other one. Gedanken sat bolt upright and stared at the screen in disbelief. To her amazement, she saw that the beam going to the back was arriving a fraction of a second before the other beam got to the front. It was only a tiny difference, but it was definitely there. And the faster the spacecraft went, the bigger the difference became. That's wrong," she exclaimed. "That's not the way it was, Uncle. It wasn't. I swear it." Uncle Albert chuckled. "A dead heat, eh? Ha! Some dead heat that is." Gedanken looked across at her uncle. "But this is crazy." She gave a helpless gesture. "I don't understand. It can't be right. I know they arrived at the same time." "According to you, yes. For you, a genuine dead heat. But, according to me, no. No way was that a dead heat. For me, the beam going to the back wins every time. If they arrived at the same time for you, they couldn't have arrived at the same time according to me. That's what I wanted to check out, and it's all worked out splendidly." "It has?" said Gedanken, looking more and more confused. "Of course, quite splendidly." And with that, Uncle Albert got up and switched off the video. "Whoops, is that the time?" he said, looking at the clock. "You'd better be running home. You'll be putting all this in your project, of course. It's one of the most interesting results." "It is?" "Well, of course it is." "But, Uncle—" "Now, run along. Your mum and dad will be wondering where you are. Uncle, now, come along." "Uncle!" cried Gedanken, stamping her foot. Uncle Albert looked surprised. "Good heavens, what is it?" "I haven't got a clue what you're on about." "You haven't?" said Uncle Albert, somewhat taken aback. "No, I haven't." "Oh, well, I thought it was obvious." "Obvious!" exclaimed Gedanken. "What's obvious about that?" she said, pointing at the now blank screen. "How can a race be a dead heat for me and not a dead heat for you? I'm going to look stupid if I write that one down." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," said Uncle Albert. "Oh, no? Well, it's all right for you. You don't have to stand up in front of the whole class and explain all this to rotten old Turnip and the others with all that sniggering going on. I'm going to look like a right idiot." She slumped back into her chair. "I should never have got mixed up in all this space and time stuff," she continued. "I should have done something easy, like dinosaurs. You know where you are with dinosaurs. Or," she added mockingly, "even energy in the home." Uncle Albert went over to his writing desk and rummaged through the pens and pencils. He picked up a felt-tip pen. "Give me a chance to explain it," he said. Gedanken folded her arms and looked sulky. "Well," said Uncle Albert, "what you've got to lose. I mean, say, energy in the home, double glazing, electric toothbrushes. After all this," he gestured towards the TV set, "a bit boring, isn't it?" Gedanken almost smiled. "Light beams always travel at the same speed," he continued. "It doesn't matter if the lamp giving out the light is moving or not. It doesn't matter if someone is watching, it is standing still, like I was, or is on the move, like you were. Everyone always sees the light beams going at the same speed. Always, right?" Gedanken nodded grudgingly. "Well now, according to you, the two beams go the same distance. They start out together, therefore they go the same distance, at the same speed, so they must arrive together. A dead heat, right?" Gedanken nodded again. "But, according to me, they didn't have the same distance to go." "Well, they must have," said Gedanken. "No," said Uncle Albert, "they didn't. The beam going to the back didn't go so far, and that's why it arrived first." "But it must have gone the same distance." Uncle Albert shook his head. He reached out and rewound the videotape. "Let's see that in slow motion." The picture came up. The spacecraft was now moving very, very slowly across the screen. At the moment when the lamps emitted the two beams, Uncle Albert froze the picture. With the felt-tip pen, he marked the position of the lamps on the screen with an arrow. "Right, so that is where the beams start out from. As you can see at this moment, they have exactly the same distance to go to the front and to the back. Agreed?" "Yes." "Right, now let us move on a little bit." He pressed the slow forward button, and the spacecraft continued to inch its way across the screen. At the point where the backward-going beam hit the rear wall of the spacecraft, he froze the picture again, and added a second arrow, this time to indicate where this beam was when it arrived at the wall. He looked across at Gedanken. "It is one," he said. "Well, that's because it's going faster than the other one," said Gedanken. No, it is not. They are both going at the same speed. This is where the front one's got to go." He added a third arrow opposite the front-going beam. "It is gone exactly the same distance as the other one. That's where they both started from." He pointed to the middle arrow, "and that is where each of them have got to now. They're going at the same speed for me, just as they were for—" "Wait a minute! I get it!" cried Gedanken, her face suddenly brightening. "I get it! The back wall of the spacecraft! It's moved! It's not the backward one that's going faster. It's because it hasn't got so far to go. Look!" she continued excitedly. "The back of the craft has moved. It's come forward to meet the light beam. And the front's moved, but that's gone further away from the beam. The other beam's having to chase after the front wall, and that's why it hasn't got there yet. Do you see, Uncle? Do you get it?" Uncle Albert looked at her with a twinkle in his eye. "Yes, I do. Thank you, Gedanken. I do get it. I was the one explaining it to you, if you remember." He smiled. "Let's just run it on a bit more." He allowed the tape to wind on until the front-going beam eventually arrived at the nose of the craft. He added the final arrow to complete the picture. "There we are," he said. "The two beams go different distances, but at the same speed, so they arrive at different times, according to me." "Yes," Gedanken said, "that's obvious." "That is why I said it's obvious, when you think about it." "Well, so that's it then. The beam that goes to the back cheats," said Gedanken with satisfaction. "Yes," Uncle Albert said, "I suppose you could put it like that." "But it is a bit peculiar, isn't it?" said Gedanken. "Well, yes, it is. Your spacecraft time not only goes more slowly than the Earth time, that's what we found out before, but things that happen at the same time according to you don't happen at the same time according to me." She looked puzzled again. "But we both saw the light beams start the race together. I saw them start out at the same time, and so did you." "That's true. We only disagree about things that happen in different places. The beams start out from the same place, the center of the cabin. and that is something that looks the same for both of us. But they went to different finishing lines, and that's where we see the difference. The further apart the finishing lines are, the greater the difference in the finishing times. And the faster the rocket, the greater the difference in times. Yes, that's right. Uncle Albert was about to switch off the recorder when Gedanken interrupted. Oh, Uncle, can't we see a bit more? We were coming up to the part where things started to go a bit wrong. Oh, said Uncle Albert, yes, I was forgetting about that. Your flying pig and all that. I wonder if it did actually record that. He started the tape up again. They watched intently. At first, everything appeared normal. The spacecraft was cruising steadily, but then, quite slowly, it did begin to dive downwards, just as Gedanken remembered it doing. Look, Uncle, this is it! Next, the spacecraft lurched violently upwards. Then it began to dive again. Up it went a second time, and by now, however, the picture was becoming faint and breaking up. It became more and more difficult to make out what was going on. Finally, the picture disappeared altogether. Nothing was left but interference. The snowy effect you get when the aerial is pulled out of your TV set. Oh, sighed Gedanken. It's gone. We didn't even get the pig noise. What a pity, said Uncle Albert. Yes, that is a shame. I can't make out from that what the trouble could have been. He switched the set off. Come on, he said. Just look at the time. You really must be going. All right, Uncle, she said, getting up to leave. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow? Sorry, he said. I'm very busy tomorrow. Supposed to be lecturing, giving a talk to some scientists. I'm telling them about what we've been finding out. I have to do projects too sometimes, you know. He grinned. Tell you what, why don't we have a break from all this hard thinking? How about us taking the boat out for a sail on Saturday? Oh, Uncle, that would be lovely, said Gedanken. I could wear my new tracksuit top I got from Dad for my birthday. As she was leaving, she turned and asked, Uncle, with all this thinking, does your brain ever hurt? Mine does. Ha! Not when I am sailing, it doesn't.